Hey guys, Pete here. Here with Jim again this week. We got 2 weeks in a row of Jim.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so I guess you'll be back for the finale. So really, you're pretty much here to the end, except for next week. So yeah, we're going to be talking about episode 208, Sweet Vitriol, and I was thinking about this. You know, I guess we had Miss Wong all season and everything, but like the idea of like straight up child labor, like that wasn't really something that I thought would be going on, since it's pretty much illegal nowadays. You know what I mean? In our version of reality. What was the first? How old were you when you got your first job?
I was 17.
Yeah. I did a thing like when I was 12. I did there was a golf course, and you could get like a caddy job, you know what I mean?
Nice.
So you'd go in on like Sundays and you would walk 18 with some guy, and then you would get, I think you got like, I can't even remember. It wasn't very much money for how long it takes when you think about it, but you're 12, so it's pretty cool. And then they give you a tip, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Usually. So it was yeah, like if you think about it like that, like I started working when I was 12, and I remember I got my first job when I turned 16, but like I started working with them a little bit earlier because our family knew the guy that owned the restaurant that I went to work for or whatever, and he just sort of paid me under the table for a few months before I actually turned 16. So I got a little bit of experience with that, but not really like, you know, going in and working hard shifts in a factory and you know, having a little ether to smooth things along.
I did work in a brick factory for half a day. I went in, I must have been 18 at the time, so I guess technically not child labor in a factory, but I went in, they had me pushing around brick dust. I don't know if you ever pushed around brick dust, but it is heavy.
No, that seems terrible though.
It's basically a pile of bricks in powder form.
Yeah.
And I went to lunch and I never came back because that sucked.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess I don't want to jump ahead of things too much, but whenever you when you were watching this the first time, because I mean the thing about the ether kind of really seemed like a difference in, you know, Severance's reality and our reality to me. Like it seemed like a marker, because it just doesn't seem like a drug that anybody does as their first choice, or at least in my lifetime, you know what I mean? Because even if people do inhalants, there's just other ones that seem to be more readily available and popular, right? So it felt like it was a choice, and it was sort of a difference between that. But, you know, beyond the fact that they have this child labor that seems to be openly going on, I don't know if we got a whole lot more of that in this episode. Did you pick up on anything that would kind of make you think about how this time, like how the timelines diverged, or why this is, you know, in a place called PE instead of a state that we know of and whatnot?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It all kind of fits together to make this weird otherworldly quality. And you had mentioned in your video about the prop that they put up in that Chinese restaurant, and how that was posted online, and it had mentioned like the ether is a popular anesthetic as opposed to was.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yeah,
like I mean, it fell out of favor here in like the 1950s, or even before that. And I think you know, the only thing that had to happen was something that, because like ether is super flammable.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's just like, even if you use it recreationally, like I don't know if this is kind of way off the rails, but like I spent a lot of time reading up on this stuff this week for some reason. And like remember when Richard Pryor caught on fire, right?
Uh-huh.
And the freebasing accident, that's an ether related thing. They use ether to
Is
freebase.
that
Like
what it was? Wow.
yeah. So
Okay.
like it has its uses and people, and it's it I guess it, I mean, I've never tried it, but I guess it does produce a euphoria, and you can actually drink it too, but there's other things that you have to do to make that work. But like, yeah, it's just got some drawbacks to it that, it really wouldn't be the most popular thing unless there's a reason. And so like, this is, to me, the most obvious reason in a show that's about this mega corporation is because this mega corporation wanted it to still be the most, the most used anesthetic. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and I don't know if it has a place inside of Lumen's current industry, or if it is still in their minds a popular anesthetic simply because it lives on in Kier, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it's something to think about, because we know that like the cars are different, and we know that I guess what I'm saying without saying is that I feel like we're looking at a reality where this place where we're at it's been isolated maybe by choice. You know what I mean? Like there's
That's
some
the
kind of
I got.
Yeah. So like, of course, Lumen still operates in the rest of the world and everything else, but that Kier, we knew Kier was like we knew it was like a company town. We can see that Salt's Neck is basically a factory town where everything revolves around this thing at the center. But I feel like that all the weirdness that we're kind of experiencing, stuff like this, is not just for like style. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a story reason that's going to come up at some point. We'll see. I guess, that's getting a little ahead of things. I guess should introduce you to my viewers. And you could tell us like what's going on over there at your podcast, Bald Move.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously we're covering Severance as well. We've got the Waffle Potty podcast. We're also covering Yellow Jackets at the same time, but don't ask me any questions about it because I'm laser focused on Severance. He was asking me questions about Yellow Jackets. I'm like, wait, I can't remember what happened this week because Severance has crowded it out. Yeah, we're over there doing podcasts on a whole bunch of TV shows. Going to be doing Andor and Last of Us in April when those come back. So just kind of wrapping up these two shows right now.
Yeah, like we've been doing this all season long, and you and your co-host Aaron have agreed to split up weeks. You were here last week, but like I said, there was a scheduling thing, so we had to switch it around. But it's been you guys have really helped out in having us do this, and I think that on the finale we're all going to be together. Next week, I guess I should let you guys know that I have popcorn for dinner is coming back. Aaron will be here, like I mentioned, and those guys will be joining too. We did episode 3, and so there'll be a couple here, 2 of them here. So we're gonna have our biggest lineup next week. So that'll be something. I guess 208 is. I guess the first time I watched it, I was a little let down in the way that it felt like I knew it was a short episode. The finale is also the season 1 is also a short episode, but it's one of the best episodes. You know what I mean? So like short isn't necessarily bad, but what I felt like when I watched it was that it was a short runtime, but they were also still kind of padding it out quite a bit. I like the scenery. I like this. I've never been to a town exactly like this. Never been to a region that's exactly like this. So it's really fascinating, and it's kind of cool to look at and all that kind of stuff. But it just felt like a little bit strange. And at the end of the day, the revelations were they kind of just made me forget about all that. Like I didn't feel upset about it or anything like that. But I saw a lot of people when I looked at the comments on my video this morning when I woke up, I saw a lot of people were complaining. I can be somewhat sympathetic to that complaint, like as far as not as action packed, as not as like focused as sometimes they are or whatever. But like I think, and I said this in my video, I think what happened was that they realigned their idea for how they were going to introduce Gemma, which, you know, initially they were going to kind of spread that out throughout the season. And then we would have in an episode, we would have the conclusion of that. Like it would all build up to it. But instead they rearranged things so that would all happen in episode 7, which was amazing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was, like I said last week, it was probably my favorite episode of the whole show to that point. So like, if that's what we got, was a really awesome episode 7, then episode 8 that is still significant, but also just felt like it dragged in a few points. I think that's the ideal choice anyway. So like I'm, you know, it didn't really bother me that much, but I'd be lying if I was like, man, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you. I like this episode a lot. I saw even a lot of people in chat are saying like, yeah, episode's a little boring. I understand that too, though. Like, there's a lot of establishing shots in this. I think there's like a 2-minute sequence at the beginning of this episode that is all just establishing shots, and
yeah,
that certainly sets a pace for the episode. I will say, and I said this in our podcast actually, I think this episode is just on the border of being too long. If it had stuck around for another couple minutes, I probably would have had that opinion where it was pretty slow and boring, even with all the reveals. But
yeah,
I think they have a good feel for it. You know, they made this episode a lot shorter than your standard episode because I think they knew if they tried to put anything else in it, it would just be too much of that slower pacing. And I don't mind a slow paced episode as long as it's good. And I thought this episode was good. So
yeah, like that's what I said. By the end of it, I was, you know, I was not upset. I was like, wow, what does that mean? You know? And
in regard to that episode 7 thing though, I do agree with you. I thought episode 7 was amazing. And I've rarely seen it done well that they take an episode and kind of split it up into a bunch of different vignettes and stick it at the beginning or in the middle of other episodes, and it works out well. Like I'm struggling to come up with an example that actually was flawlessly executed. It almost never works. So yeah, I think that would have been a big mistake. Even if it means we get an episode 8 that everybody's like, okay. I think you'll turn on Severance next week and it's going to be 2 bangers in a row, 9 and 10, and you're just going to totally forget that episode 8 was a little slow.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We were kind of talking about that before, and we're going to talk about that again later because of there's a lot of stuff. Like one thing about having 2 departure episodes in a row is that it really does sort of put stuff off to the side long enough that you sort of almost like, you know, with Burt and Irv, say, you know, like that's something we'll get into in a bit. Like, think about how long ago that seems now, that dinner scene, you know?
Right.
Like
yeah.
Like that's only not like show timeline. It's not that long ago, but it feels like it was like a lifetime ago we were talking about that. So I think that'll all be to good effect. You know what I mean? Like we'll be like, oh yeah, I forgot about this and I forgot about that. And now, you know, like as we're getting this stuff like knocked down.
Yeah, like Dylan and his wife and hiding that information. I mean, do you remember? There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there was a ton. I wanted to, I saw this question in there. I want to kind of look at this for a second before we go in. Scumplay says, I'm curious how you feel about the episode after Helena was almost drowned. They said her tempers would balance back out. Is Milchek Cobel chip to balance emotions too? This is the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think before we talk about what we're going to talk about is I think this is a good kind of misconception to address beforehand. When I saw that, I thought, and I believe the intention was that he was saying that they're going to do their Kier woo-woo stuff to rebalance her tempers, like what was it? What do they call it? The
obligation
obligement session or something like that. And it's something that we've seen in the break room, like what's going on there, where they have to do the compunction statement over and over again to kind of get their vital signs down to where they're not having this reaction anymore. That's what I think that they're hinting at. Not that her chip has anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think that's important is because that we're talking about severance and about the effect it has on the severed individuals, but Cobel, it's important. I think the whole balancing the tempers thing is important for the non-severed people as well, because like we have this whole cult side of things, right? And people start to think about the cult and they start to think, oh, well, they want to live forever and they want to do all this stuff like that, which there's, maybe, what I mean? Like, we don't know yet, but like, there's a day-to-day kind of thing going on with them, like where they think that following this philosophy, makes their life better, that it's the right way to live, whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that I think we can kind of sometimes overlook, you know what I mean? Because whenever we're talking about Cobel here, I'm of the opinion that it's going to be pretty hard for her to walk away from whatever it is she got from that, when she was, the backstory part of this, like when she was first welcomed into the school. So yeah, like maybe we should just go right into that at this point. Like,
okay.
Because I listened to your podcast and I think you were kind of a little more on the, she was flipping at the end of this episode.
Yeah, definitely. That's how I read it. And some of that had to do with just transition shots that they used over the course of the episode. And maybe we can talk about what you think the meaning of those is. But there's a shot where she's laying in her mother's bed and they transition from day to night. And, you see the sun move across. But then you've also got a shot where they show that same overhead that they do at the very beginning of the episode of the roiling sea and the rocks and everything. But it's icebergs is what I'm going to call them. Big chunks of ice. And then that changes into the roiling sea again. And I'm trying to decipher that. I didn't realize it was the same shot until after we recorded that podcast as the beginning of the episode. So to me, it's almost a return to something. And I was going on that, but also the betrayal here. I mean, the hypocrisy of it all, the betrayal. I think she makes some kind of distinction also. Like I think you were saying in your video with Lumen versus the Eagans, and the cult versus the corporation. I think there's some distinction there for her. So I'm not saying like she's going to jettison all of her belief system, but I think there is going to be a turning on the corporation part of this.
Yeah, and that's a thing, because I guess my thought about it is that I may be too focused, because I find the cult part of it interesting. You know what I mean? Like I like the way that works, and it's like it's similar to addiction too, because I find that part of it pretty interesting. But that's clearly not the most important thing that's going on in the story here. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of a side effect of a larger thing. And I don't know if it's just that I'm too clued into like her devotion, but I mean, I feel like that if I am, it's because they showed me that in the first season. They showed me her shrine and everything like that. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I don't know. I think that I think you're absolutely right that they set it up that way. Like when they play Firewoman, you know what I mean? Like this is an anthem, like, you know, like a kind of a rock anthem song from, I don't know, late 80s or early 90s or something, right? And it's, you know, she would be the Firewoman. What does a Firewoman do? Burn shit down, right? Like, so that, I mean, I think they definitely set that up. And like I said, that, you know, there's, with that playing in the background, there's that moment where you see the phone ring again and she picks it up and you're just sort of like, yeah. But then you're like, wait, this is Harmony Cobel, you know? Like, I think that is the, because that's the thing about when you have you have an episode that's just focused completely on her. They want us to understand her, at least, like, not necessarily like, have some sympathy for her, even if she is ultimately the bad guy, you know, in air quotes or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like whenever you get to the end of it, you know, and you see this, it seems like, oh yeah, she's turned, you know, she's going to be on our side, on the right side. I just feel like it's going to end up being a lot more complicated than that, just because
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I don't think it's as cut and dry as like she's going to go to Mark's house and suddenly she's on the home team. She might have ulterior motives.
Because I think, and this is, I guess, would be kind of the next thing, because I see some people talking about this in the thing. I saw a lot of people saying that it was unrealistic for her to be the one that created Severance. And I guess if you look at it like she actually built a chip herself, then that would be true. That would that would absolutely be true. The way I'm interpreting this is that she had the concept and she had the idea of how it might work. And then Lumen is one of the biggest biotech companies in the world, corporations, conglomerate, you know, like multinational, like if they want to make something, they can, right? Like if a thing can exist, then it can be developed. I don't think that she had anything to do with the development other than conceptually. Maybe she understands it, and then when she goes to work for Lumen, then she becomes involved on some level or whatever. But how did you interpret that?
I thought she had more direct involvement. It's a lot has to do with how she said, you know, she has the base code in that notebook, which it is impossible to put enough code in that notebook. You could write at 0-point font and you'll still never get enough code into that notebook to do anything to your brain.
Not to mention there really isn't any code at all whenever they flip through it.
Yeah, I didn't see it. And I was a coder, so I know. B, I had a real hard time because I was also in a cult as a kid. I feel like this is the nexus of all my experience right here. I was also in a cult until I was 19. And the way cults operate typically is they deprive you of information and education in order to keep you on the treadmill of belief. And it was really hard for me to swallow that the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls is going to have a biotech course advanced enough for her to come up with this at honestly any age. Because that's just not how cults tend to operate. Now, you make a good point, though, that Lumen is something different. Lumen is a combination of cult and tech company. And so I'm willing to, I guess, let that point go. But I still got the feeling, given all the diagrams and all the extensive stuff that she says is in that notebook, that she was personally involved in most of the creation of the chip.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that if you look at it that way, it is like, okay, I'll just give them that one. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just suspend my disbelief because, yeah, you think that their school would be kind of backward ass, really, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it would be teaching you more about the cult's views on life than it would science and philosophy and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, and because obviously the threat to the cult is that, if you start to get an outside opinion on them, then a lot of that stuff looks really flimsy. It just sort of starts to, you start to actually see it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you never do, then they can just keep reinforcing the same things. And if that's all you know, that's all you know, right?
Chat's super curious. Yeah, it was Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you wanted to say
I
that.
talk about it all the time on our podcast.
I'm familiar.
Leftovers.
Yeah, I'm familiar because I listened to your podcast, but I didn't know if how that worked or whatever. But like, so whenever I don't really know much about the Jehovah's Witnesses, I guess I remember that's the Watchtower one, right? Like
yep.
They come to your door with the little magazine.
People love us. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's happy to see. You're like, oh, who's here? And you're like, oh, that guy with the friggin' magazine. What was I gonna say? But yeah, so did you have to do that? Like, did you work for them in that way as a child?
We went in field service pretty much every Saturday.
Right. Because that was the vibe I got from Miss Swong, like we got that it's a little bit different here, but like that's what I thought from the beginning. Once I was like, just because I was less likely to think that she was, I was thinking born into it, but what would that mean? And that's what, you think about kids going to work for the truth or whatever they call it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it wasn't an ether factory. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that there are good points about this, but like, I don't think that her having the idea is not a game. It's not like it doesn't break the story for me.
No, not at all. It more than anything, it makes me want to know what she's going to do with that information. It makes her such a danger, I guess, to Lumen. It makes her much more valuable of a piece on the board right now.
But here's the other thing, though, is does anyone know that except for James Eagan?
Probably not. Not. She's never spoken of it. She hid the notebook. They threatened her into silence. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the real thing is that it does give her a lot in this, but only really against James Eagan, who is the current CEO and the hardest person to even get close to. Like, his daughter can't get close to him, kind of, you know what I mean? So like, that's why I still kind of think that that's where because I went into this pretty thoroughly in my video, but like, I think that if she has this dissonance, right, that this is a bad belief system that I have, like it's supposed to be about this and this and this and that, and you see all doing all these other things, you know what I mean? Like, she comes to this town and sees it's destroyed. It's the town she came from. That's a direct result of the factory, right? Sissy makes the argument that it wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that, but that doesn't change the fact that it came there, it polluted the area, and then it left, and now there's no jobs. I mean, I grew up, outside of, like, in the Pittsburgh area, and there's so many little towns like that where the steel mill just pulled out in the late 70s, early 80s, or whenever it was, you know what I mean? And then there's just nothing there. You know what I mean? Like, there were like thousands of jobs just disappeared overnight. And like, what is going to take its place? Nothing. You know what I mean? Like, there's, and
yeah, it just shows like they don't really care about these people, right? It's not, there's no loyalty coming the other way. All the loyalty goes up.
Right. Which is what's interesting about the combination here, because that's true with corporations, but and also with cults, right?
Very much so. Yeah.
So that leaves a young girl in a situation where she's trying to make sense of things, right? She's coming from a harsh situation. This is high control. The murder legal Myrtle Eagan School for Girls is like a, you know, like you said, they're gonna limit her information or connection with the outside world. All these different things are going to be there, but it's not going to be the same kind of desperation and shit that she came from. So you could see her being like turned, like this structure and all this kind of stuff, kind of feeling like a positive, right? Stuff that she didn't get at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so I just think it's going to be pretty hard for her to just jettison that. You know what I mean? Like, because she's obviously she's been wronged directly by James Eagan, right? So like she can say, it's not Kier's ideas. Kier's ideas as they are thought are perfect. And it would really work. It's these fuckers like James Eagan who are, you know, messing it all up. If they just would do it right, the world would get better, you know? So I feel like that's going to be, that's going to make things very complicated for her.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I don't know how much you want to talk about Hampton here in a minute, but his I guess idea of her also gets tied back up into Lumen leaving the town because she left the town too. And you get that like animosity between them is not we had some kind of falling out. It's that she went away and then so did Lumen, and she like it feels like she was part of Lumen leaving, and he's transferred a lot of that anger onto her.
And then she went to work for them in middle management too. You know,
yeah,
what I mean?
She's still with them as far as he knows. Yep.
Now she's one of the people who makes the decisions to do things like that. As far as he knows, like he doesn't probably know what she does at Lumen at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I like that. Like I said, this one, I didn't have that much fun when I was watching it the first time up, you know, for the first whatever half but when I started, everything that I thought about this when I started writing my script for the video was like, there's so many cool things like that built into this. It's one of those episodes like that I had a lot more fun thinking about it than I did watching it the first time. I wanted to bring this up because this is something that I saw quite a bit in the comments today. Lalani Luna, thank you for the 15. Little late to the chat, but Cobel probably wanted to come up with Severance to take her mother's pain away. So I sort of said at the end of my video that this all add up to her creating said Severance? And I was sort of thinking about it more as an open-ended question, like what is, you know, like what would, because, and really honestly, like the part I didn't say there was that I was thinking about like how that ties back to her belief in Kier. Like she probably got it from Kier was my thinking, not did she honestly have a reason in her life? Because she has several, like Lalani points out here, right? What did you think about why she would be, as a child, would be wanting to create this severance process?
I think this is a pretty good theory. I actually hadn't thought about it until now, but that sort of makes a lot of sense. And especially when you pair it with, you know, she's got this shrine to her mother, alongside the Kier shrine in her house there in Kier. It could start to paint a picture where, yeah, she left hoping that she would be able to save her and was unfortunately not able to in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an implication towards that. And there's another implication towards like she was literally a child, you know, had to go to work at age 8 or younger, you know what I mean? And work in a factory under harsh conditions. One of the things that I noticed that I didn't notice in like just now, right before when I was taking some of these screen caps was that, because I saw the plaque that Sissy had on her wall, and that kind of, she's basically the coordinator of the child slavery. You know what I mean? Like I forget what the language is, but they, you know,
the youth something matron.
Yeah, I have it somewhere. I'll find it. But like, I noticed when I went back to take these other ones, like of her shrine and stuff like that, that she has plaques everywhere There's like multiple of those same plaques, like all through the house. Like there's one next to it right on the wall. There's one in her room. There's like, you can't read any of the other ones. That's the only one you can actually make it out, but I assume they're all the same. So like she was a real striver in there in that organization, as far as I can tell. But let me just look real quick what they do call it. They call it the youth
apprentice
patron. Is that what it is? Or matron?
Yeah.
Yeah. So other words, the child slave handler. Right.
Yeah, that's messed up. I hadn't recognized that that's kind of what that is.
Yeah, because she said it. She said she called them apprentices earlier, and I was like, "Well, that's not what you call that. You know what I mean? That's not what you call a kid you're giving ether to go mine them vat or whatever." But and
I could also see, along the lines of maybe her trying to save her mother. Maybe that's why she's so resentful of Sissy, because, and it says like you pulled the tube on her. Because maybe she thought she had more time to fix her.
Yeah, well, I think that's not a stretch. I mean, I think any kid that loves their mom, and like that, I think is the one thing that this episode definitely didn't miss, was that, you know, her life in Salt's Neck might have been shit, but she did love her mother, and her mother appeared to love her. Yeah. And so, you know, like that's an important point, you know what I mean? And I always thought, like I said, I always thought that it was that there would be some resentment there from her because she was hurt at work. And you know, but like I don't know that this episode made that any more or less clear.
Yeah, it's tough to say if she, you know, was injured at work, like she fell into an ether vat or something, or if this is long-term ether huffing sickness like everybody else has, right?
Yeah.
When you see their 8-year-olds huffing ether for fun.
Yeah, that would have a negative health side effect, I would think, right?
Yeah, we don't know if her mom was an ether addict or not, but we'll see, I guess. Maybe we'll learn more.
Yeah. I mean, I know that. Well, I read in an article this morning that Patricia Arquette, they told her whenever they were making season 1 that her mother was an addict. I don't think the show has ever really made that clear in any way, or even made me think that that was a possibility. Like for me, like the story was that she worked at a lumen factory and something went wrong related to that just being an unhealthy, unsafe place to work. But apparently that's part of the motivation that they gave her for the character, that her mother was an ether addict. And that might be something that comes up down the road, but I in my opinion, it has not come up in the show. And so therefore that's just something that, you know, it's the actor is bringing to the role. You know?
Right. I don't think it's been confirmed. I do think there are hints, obviously, like her being on some kind of breathing apparatus. That definitely hints at she had some problems with her lungs. But as you point out, working in an ether factory would probably do that, right? Kier probably had a lot of problems with his lungs.
Yeah, because he actually did as a child too. I wanted to one other thing before, because we have a lot of different characters and things going on here, and Kier is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. But where is Salt's Neck? Do you think that?
I mean, I could see this being somewhere on the Canadian coast.
I guess I should preface that by saying that it's filmed in Canada.
Yeah, Newfoundland, Labrador. Yeah, I don't know where it's meant.
Peninsula.
I mean, I can see it being kind of anywhere. I mean, this could be up in Alaska. This could be, somewhere along.
Well, this is in driving distance of Kier, PE, right? So like,
which we don't know where that is.
Yeah. So
we think maybe Prince Edward Island, right?
Yeah, I feel like it still is more consistent with, the Mid-Atlantic, East Coast, like where it's filmed, basically those places. Although this is upstate New York and New York State compared to where this is in Canada is pretty far. Like there's more distance in real life than there would be on what the show told us, I guess. But like, I still think it's kind of regionally in that it feels like that anyways. You mentioned like, wait a minute. I lost the thread. Sorry. But yeah, I don't know. How important is it? Like where this is? Does it really even matter?
No, it's not at all important, but we're curious people. So of course we want to know.
Oh, you said the Prince Edward Island thing. This is something that I've seen Dan Erickson discount, I should say, in two different places. So I just try to bring that up because I see it a lot. As far as what he said, if we can believe him, which in my opinion, he has not lied yet. You know what I mean? Like they're like obviously creators and people that are involved with TV shows do that sometimes. At least in stuff that I've read, he hasn't like willfully misled us for something yet. So I still give him the benefit of the doubt. He said that it was, the PE was never, the intention was never for that to be a real place and specifically said not Prince Edward Island in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it feels like to me. They're painting a sort of, parallel world here. It's not really our world necessarily, but it's close enough that we can get invested in it in the same ways.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about her mom and this idea of addiction. That's something that might come back up. I was surprised to find that she wasn't a follower of Kier at all.
Yeah, right.
It makes sense because we didn't know Sissy existed before. Having Sissy in the house, it wouldn't be hard to find your way to Kier. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Even if your mom hated it, you're gonna have that. You're gonna have that opposing view with lady who walks around with a rock with Kier's face drawn on it and rubs it whenever stuff doesn't go the way she wants. Right.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that was a surprise and probably an important part of what happens with her going forward, right? Was that she adopted this in her mother's absence, but her mother was never a believer. With Hampton, I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up about him? An interesting character. He feels transition like he I don't think we'll see him again or anything like that. I feel like that's a one episode character.
It's a great way to go out too.
Yeah.
Tame these tempers, assholes.
Yeah.
That's a great line. I really liked the play there between him and Harmony. I thought it really shed a lot of light on situations, or it gave you hints around the edges of like what happened here, what happened in Harmony's life, what happened with Lumen in this town, and you could really like start to see a sort of fuzzy but getting clearer picture of Harmony's childhood through this guy, right? That resentment that he has, and then as they open up to each other and kind of remember about the good times, which were them at 8 years old huffing ether on their lunch break.
Yeah.
Which was probably just a 15-minute lunch break, I'm going to guess. It really, I found myself really liking these characters a lot more, or sympathizing with characters. Maybe not necessarily liking Harmony so much, but sympathizing, understanding her a lot more.
Yeah.
And it comes down to their interaction, really.
Yeah. I mean, I liked this guy. I was listening. I've been saying his name wrong for forever. I noticed from listening to the official podcast that I always called him James LaGrosse.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't say the S, I guess, apparently.
Oh, is it French Canadian
mm-hmm.
name?
Well, I don't know if it's just French or if he's from Canada or where he's from actually, but the way they pronounce it, people who know him, he says it different than that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like I had this. I remember him from the movie Drugstore Cowboy, which I liked a lot whenever I was pretty young, and he's not been in a lot of stuff, but he pops up every once in a while, and he's perfect for that. You know what I mean? At least for me, because of my connection to that movie in particular. It's just like, oh, that guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's a perfect one of that guy kind of characters, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah. I wasn't familiar with him. I haven't been familiar with a lot of the sort of, that guys in this, like Robbie Benson.
Yeah, I was the same with Robbie Benson. I knew the name and the face looks vaguely familiar, but I didn't. I like when I looked at his IMDb, I knew obviously Beauty and the Beast, but that's a voice role. That's not something they.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered the movie Running Brave, the title, but I couldn't remember seeing it at the time. You know.
Yeah.
What about Jane Alexander? Were you familiar with her?
I want to say I've probably seen her in some other cult movie because she's so good at it. Have I seen her in like Wicker Man or something?
I couldn't remember. Yeah, like I couldn't remember anything that I had seen her in, but she looked, she looked instantly recognizable to me. You know what I mean?
Apparently she's in Kramer versus Kramer. That's probably a big one for her.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones if you look at her IMDb. So about him, I went on a little tangent there over his name. What I liked about him in the way that his character kind of connected the effects of it. It kind of looked at the addiction, like he's in real life, I think he's probably 60 years old. Right. So like this guy is, he's ending middle age at this point. Right. Like he's getting to like where he's on the brink of becoming elderly. Right. So like, this is a life spent like huffing ether, the thing that he hates, that from the place that he hated for his life. You know what I mean? And like the way that he can't quit that is also, I feel like, a thing with how people who are really deep on the Kier stuff will have a hard time quitting that as well.
Without a doubt. Yeah. There's for a lot of reasons, it's hard to get out of a cult. And you look at the way that like Sissy reacts to something that should shock her out of.
She tried to burn the notebook.
she completely tries to deny and cover up the truth. I mean, if that is not,
if it doesn't it's like this is, yeah.
I don't know what is.
Yeah, like she was like, okay, well, this is clearly real, and I can't, and I have to agree with you that what you're saying is true. How can I solve this? Well, if I burn it and it doesn't exist, you can't show it to anyone else.
Right?
It's not true anymore.
Crazy. I mean, it feels so real too. That feels like an actual reaction from a human being who has invested their entire life in a cult.
That's the thing. Like, what else can you do? Like, Aaron went into this on your most recent podcast, and it's like your choices are to be like, oh yeah, I was completely wrong for my entire life. Like everything that I've invested all this time in, like she's done some shit. You know what I mean? Like Sissy has done some shit that she would have to feel responsible for if she didn't say, well, I did it for Kier, and that was good enough, because you know what I mean? Like that's how it works. Right. So I feel like, we got all this same stuff that's going to come up for Harmony as well. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yes, you're right.
Yes, they have screwed her over. They have fired her and everything else. But she's if she's going to go all the way, if she's going to leave them behind for good, which probably will happen over the course of the the thing, you know what I mean? But like,
Mhm.
if she's going to do that, there's like a lot of stuff that has to sort of happen first, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with that thing you said. Like, it's going to be more complicated than just she's on the good side now.
I see one of the comments says Sissy got all the kids addicted to ether. Yeah, she did, because it was in service for Kier, and like whatever twisted logic you have to apply to get through that dissonance, it's provided through their belief. You know what I mean? Like there's a way that they can, the way they can spin that around if they're, you know, if we're to believe it's that good at keeping people engaged or whatever. So yeah, like I guess that kind of brings it into Kier, you know, like I spent a decent amount of time reading the compliance handbooks, like the stuff that you can actually get from the screens in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was trying to figure out like because if we know that she has that point that she's trying to get people severed, then that has to be, like I said, I think it has to be born in Kier's philosophy of like why that would be right. You know what I mean? Because mostly what he talks about is taming the tempers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that in because it's a compliance handbook, because he's talking to employees, he talks about his own jobs as a kid, which he had 2 that he mentions. He talks about working at the thing where he met Imogene, and then he talks about a furniture factory that he worked at, and there he has a boss who's not good, you know, not a good guy. And he's got a good friend that works there with him who loses a hand. And it turns out that this boss hates amputees, right? So like they have to hide his injury, because if he finds out, he's going to send them to the children's prison. So like there's a lot of weird stuff in there. And
wow.
I guess my question for you is like, how much of that do you think that is actually not completely made up BS?
That sounds insane. I don't know who like hates amputees.
Yeah.
Like why hate an amputee? I don't understand.
Well, because he's not gonna be productive. If he only has one hand, how can he
Oh,
do the job? You know what I mean? And he has
how do
this
you
other
hide
option
that you
available to him. He can just throw him in jail. He can just send them away to children's prison,
to
whatever that
children's
is.
prison? This all sounds made up. None of this sounds
well,
real.
yeah, that's the funny part though, is that it's like almost 50-50 though, right?
Yeah. When you've got 8-year-olds huffing ether, and we know that that's real, then who knows? And it reminds me a little bit of the story about his brother, right?
Yeah.
He goes and his head melts, and like he's jerking off in the woods. None of that felt quite real either. Like it all felt like it was
Yeah.
metaphor.
Well, that was all. I think that was all metaphor. You know what I mean? For the most part, I don't think he really ever had a twin. I think that's his way of like saying like, I didn't do those bad things. There was this bad other part that,
and I killed it, and now it's not part of me anymore.
Right, but like the compliance stuff is interesting because he's talking like. He turns out to be a tycoon, right? Like he ends up being like a titan of industry. But when you go, because the reason I found this stuff was because I was trying to figure out like what his background was, like how did he end up where he did. And so he has like, if he's working as a child laborer, he seems like he should be poor, you know, coming from nothing, right? And it just like there's a lot that doesn't add up there. So when you think about Kier, like what do you feel like his path to becoming the head of this giant thing, or the creator of this giant thing, like how does that work in the way you think about the story?
Well, I think of him first as a cult leader. as opposed to a titan of industry. And cult leaders have a way of getting people to do things for them. And I could see that translating into finance, the financial means to start creating an industry there. So I guess that's kind of the thing I have in my head is he started telling people about his philosophies and convincing people that these philosophies were a way to live life. And probably a lot of people who worked in ether factories and had hard lives are inclined to look for something to give them hope. And he was giving them some kind of hope. And he used that as kind of a springboard to make money.
Yeah, so the actual thing that you'll find out if you go and look at what's available through the episodes, right, is that he basically came from nothing. You know, like he had these jobs. He went away to the army where he got some medical training. Maybe was a doctor in there, and then he gets out, and then he basically starts looming. And we know that they said that they started out in topical salves. So I think to me that kind of sounds like snake oil, where you could maybe possibly get rich quick if you were, you know, if you knew what you were doing in that, and then went legit, and then, or, you know, I guess going legit is relative, but like, you know, they have an actual pharmaceutical company, biotechnology company now. The other option is that, I mean, so that's a story. That's kind of like the corporate story. The other option is that he was always kind of from a rich and powerful family. And then he wanted to further his reach. And like you said, he realized he was charismatic, and he could throw out these philosophy things to, you know, kind of that worked with his employees and got people to follow him and work for him and everything else. And then that's when he started to get into his cult leader phase, right?
Yeah, I guess that's the cynical view of it, right? Is that this is a philosophy in pursuit of finances. I look at it sort of as the reverse, where the finances have come because he has attracted a lot of people around him with his philosophies. Here's the thing about Kier that I believe is that he's a true believer in his own philosophies, that he thinks, because why else do all this? I mean,
well, that's one of the big questions I had coming out of season 1. It was, are the people at the top true believers? And they did seem to answer that, but that doesn't, Kier isn't exactly in that group, right? He's the one that they follow.
Sure.
But I don't know. We might be getting in the weeds a little bit for what's actually, you know, like important right now. But I find all that stuff fascinating, that like, you know, because he set a lot of shit in motion in this story, right? And so we know how people, you know, how people relate to him, but we don't really know how that came to be. You know what I mean? Like how because like I said, that all sounds like propaganda. That was the question that I started out with. Company propaganda to keep employees in line. We see it through the anything, that's like a really easy sell. You know what I mean? You have these impressionable people, and you can tell them these stories about how, but if you just go to work and you just do what you're supposed to do, that's the path to happiness and love and like he actually goes into calling it love quite a bit, which I think will turn out to be important later. But like, you know, he's saying like, for doing a good job and doing what your employer wants, like that's really the only true love, you know what I mean? Because like whenever you fall in love with someone, that's sort of out of your control, you know, your attraction and everything else. But like at work, it's like you can decide that you want to do that. So it's like really like selfless love kind of situation, which is crazy. But this question, the questions all have Luna in the name. It seems like Luna Cascade this time. What are your thoughts on the connection between Ragabi and Cobel? How might it play out in the next episodes? Do you have anything on this?
I mean, that obvious connection is Lumen. I'm not sure, because the thing that surprised me about Ragabi's reaction to Cobel is how intense it was. There's real hatred there, and I don't know if this is because of what we learned this episode, like she's the inventor of the Severance chip and this whole procedure, and Ragabi has come around to the idea that this is something evil that's being done, and it's as simple as that, or if there's something more personal there. I'm not sure, but as far as how it plays out in the next few episodes, I think they're probably not going to be able to go back to Ragabi. I believe Ragabi when she says, "If that woman is in, I am out."
Yeah, I think. Well, I think you guys touched on this though too. Isn't the way that can work is that she finds out that Cobel had more to do with creating Severance. She's not just a zealot. Mm-hmm. She's actually someone who understands the process.
Yeah, no, it's possible that, if they want to try and bring her back into the fold, give her that information, but we're not sure she doesn't already have that information.
True.
That's kind of a thing that could make you hate somebody if you think
Ragabi,
and they're the creator.
Ragabi has reason to stay away. I think you could make reasons why the show doesn't really need to even bring her back, because they've kind of played her as like, we never really got to know her. You know, I mean, she was mostly working as like a device to make this thing happen for Mark. So like, I wouldn't say that I don't care about the character. Like the character's interesting or whatever, but like the way she's essential is that she brings reintegration into the story. Not like we need her for because like she's so important to us as far as how the story is playing out or whatever, right? Like there's no emotional connection really. So she could have just been a placeholder until Harmony came back or whatever. But I do think that, like her thinking might change if she sees her as not middle management, not someone who came up through the school and was raised by Lumen, but the person who actually had the idea for starting the Severance process. Then Ragabi might have some reasons to come together at that point.
Yeah. And I guess you're right. We got to assume that she doesn't know that currently, because apparently Harmony's never spoken of it. James, the only one who knows.
Yeah, nobody knows that that's the case, I don't think. We kind of touched on the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls. Is there anything else there? That the notebook or the yearbook was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I saw someone in the comments mentioning the fighting kids. That was kind of funny for me because I saw that and I was just like, well, okay, that's a weird name for a team. Like the goat angle on it didn't come to me until much later. You know, I was like, oh, that's what baby goats are called, kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of that, you think we're gonna get any more of that this season? Any more goat stuff?
Well, I think what I came away from their last appearance is that there's a lot of them. You know, there's a lot of people that work in that department. And if we were looking at like we needed numbers, you know what I mean? Like if we were looking at like we have Gemma liberated from or we need to liberate Gemma, whatever, you know what I mean? Like I could see them coming back in, like, you know, they could be a diversion. They could be like, they could do a lot of different things if they all got together and wanted to help NDR. Right.
Yeah. Any like explanation on what the goat stuff means? Like, why is it happening? We'll get any more of that this season?
No. I'm not. It's possible.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Think we'll ever get that? We have to, right?
It might just be like, because like there's 2 goat references in this 2 pages of notebooks, right? Or a yearbook. So that you could look at that 2 ways. You could be like this, they're going to keep playing this as a joke that they can turn to for, to be like, hey, look, they're called the fighting kids, or they're going to eventually explain it. I kind of tend to leaning to them not ever really explaining it, honestly, but I could be wrong. I guess they have to be careful with that, though, because fans turn on franchises for less. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I guess for me, like I don't really care what they do in there. Is like it's not the most important thing to me story wise. I would be if they have a creative way to do it that makes sense, then I'm all for it. But like I don't need it, like personally. You know what I mean? It's like not something that I lose sleep over.
Yeah, 100% with you. My co-host is all the way down the goat hole. Wants to know what the goat means.
I mean, it's fun. Like I can understand the reasons to go down there. It's just that like if you spend any amount of time like going around in circles on those theories, like none of them really make a lot of great sense. And
the cloning one is kind of out now with the testing floor being shown. So
yeah, so it's just sort of like I don't. There was a time, I'm sure, in season 1 where I really spent some time thinking about the goats, but like that, it's past.
Yeah, that's not what I come to this show
for.
A
lot of other interesting stuff has come to light since then. So, no hate for anyone who has a good idea about it. It's just like I said, it's just not like you just go in circles. Like, well, what? And because I mean, I also say. I truly believe that the goats were never supposed to be essential to what's happening down there. You know what I mean? I think that I thought they were introduced as like, wow, that's a weird thing that goes on this floor that, we could do. And then the people reacted to it in such a way that they kind of had to feel like they need to do something with it more than it was like the goats were always a big part about the, about the way the story was constructed or something like that. We talked about the notebook a little bit, like why she wanted it, right? Or was that before we came on air?
I can't remember. It's been an hour.
Yeah. I was hoping you were going to save me there.
Sorry.
When you first watched the episode, what was your thinking about why she needed that notebook? Why was this risk of going all the way back up there? Like, why was that where her head turned after being turned away from the front of Lumen?
My first instinct was she wants to blow up Lumen, like just take them down. Show what they're up to. Show the mind control kind of nature of it all. And then I thought about it more, and I was thinking, well, everybody knows what Severance is. Showing them plans for the Severance chip doesn't do anything.
Also, everyone knows that corporations do that too. Like they take responsibility, or they get credit for things that other people did, and like, you know what I mean? So like, there's not a big revelation there either.
Yeah, it almost has to be something internal, right? Like nobody at this company knows that she invented the chip, except for James, and James is taking all the credit for it. This has got to be something personally with him at this point, right? She's going to disprove the claim that he's made, and what effect that might have within the organization, I don't know. But maybe it'll do something with Helena.
Yeah, I mean, she could. I mean, I don't know that this has been even hinted at in any way, but we did bring up the point that Helena probably doesn't know. She like that would shatter her father, her thought of her father on some level, right? Like if you find out that actually he had nothing to do with the creation of Severance, wasn't his idea. He didn't like None of it. That could be useful to her, right?
Yeah, it could be leverage to get her job back, though I don't think that's what she wants at this point. I think after
I'm
this
not
episode,
sure.
Yeah?
Because like I don't know if it's just like I just want my job back, except for like it is her baby. You know what I mean? Like this, if she created it, then this is her thing, and it's been pretty clear that Cold Harbor is important towards like its development, right?
Yeah.
Even though we don't really know what Cold Harbor is, like she wanted to be there when it happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of that, like at the time you're thinking, well, she just wants her job back, but now you know that part of that was because it's her invention, right? You know what I mean? And like she wants to be there.
Yeah.
She doesn't want Milchek there because Milchek didn't friggin' come up with the idea. You know what I mean? Like all he did was his own version of going through the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls and getting the winter tide, whatever they call it for boys, wherever that is. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah, it's tough to see.
So yeah, like
to that though, right?
Yeah. So
like,
I think that is something that it changed for me, knowing that she created it, is that she does have an investment in the actual process and seeing how that, how that develops. Because, obviously something is changing with it in the current iteration as Gemma does all of what she's doing on the testing floor, right?
Yeah, it's also interesting. It kind of casts reintegration in a new light too, and her surprise over it. Like, how did she not know that reintegration would be possible before she found out, that it happened to PD and it happened?
I don't know that she didn't know, because like if you think about whenever Grainer's talking about it, like he says that PD when he comes back with the chip after it's been tested, and then they can say for sure that there was recoupling or whatever he calls it, he says we should celebrate. Like he's excited about it, and he knows her probably like at least the implication is he knows her better than anybody else does. They have some kind of intimate relation, like that they know each other quite well. And so he says that we should celebrate, as in like, aren't you excited to find out that reintegration is actually possible?
Yeah, you're right.
So she was kind of a champion for reintegration, and that's why she wanted to show the board, but we never really knew why. And I still don't really know why. What is your thinking about that?
Yeah, that's like, I'm just trying to figure out like what leverage this gives her in any way. I can't.
Well,
I can't see it.
I wasn't sure either, but now I'm thinking it relates to Helena. Because what I know is that she hates Jamie Eagan.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's what she wants to do, is she wants to topple the person that's in charge right now. I think that may override her wanting to burn down the entire corporation. Like if she's hyper focused on this one guy, how does she get to him? Well, maybe she goes and she says, look, this guy's a fraud, right? Like I made this stuff up. He took it from me when I was a kid and took all the credit. You know what I mean? Like that's where I think the leverage comes from. But then you got like
Helena's a little dissatisfied with seemingly her life at this point.
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Yeah, so maybe there's an in there with her.
But then you got Drummond, and Drummond he's not gonna, I don't think he will give a shit about, like he's the kind of guy who has to keep power in place. Like he needs the status quo, right?
He'll throw that thing in the fire, that notebook, as soon
same
as
way
he
that
sees it.
Same way that Sissy would have, yeah. Interesting. What do we got here? Michael Sanger, thank you for the 5. Exposure to ethers can harm reproductive health. And there's a lot of vacant houses, empty offices in PE. Just saying. That's an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about. I saw all the emptiness as the just because it's in the area that I grew up, there was a lot of emptiness and abandoned, just general everything, because when the jobs left, there was nowhere to work, so nobody could earn money and spend in the shops anymore. So the shops all closed down and nobody rented places anywhere. But like, that is an interesting thing that it could actually, there could be a side effect to that.
Yeah, I see all the empty space as like room for growth. I don't know, because there's a lot of empty houses, but a lot of empty office space too, ready to go for when they expand.
Yeah, all you need is you just need a business to come in to actually employ a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Lumen's a business.
Yeah, and like that was the other thing. I mean, a lot of those places around where I grew up, it was like whenever, I don't even know when it was now. I guess it was in the early, like in the first 10 years of the 21st century, like when Oxycontin went crazy. Like that's kind of what it wasn't ether there. It was just Oxycontin. Yeah. Like everybody who stayed and kind of just wasn't figuring out a way to get anything going just ended up getting hooked on Oxycontin, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What I think we hit a lot of stuff, and there's going to be a lot more when we talk about these other characters, because I do want to talk about what comes next. If you have time, are you okay with that? Yeah, because and like I said, a lot of this other stuff that we haven't touched on maybe, or we haven't really expanded on, will maybe come out in that, because like I said, there's not a lot that happens in this episode. There's some real revelations here, but a lot of it is contingent on what happens next. You know what I mean? Like, like we did talk about the ending, and it does make you think like, okay, something big's about to happen, but then you're like, oh well, where does she actually come down? Let me ask you this as we transition into what's going to happen. How do you feel about Devon calling her in the first place? Because I see a lot of people complaining about this particular plot point, that why would Devon ever call Cobel?
I think it's pretty simple. That's an amazing photo of her, by the way. Yeah. My God. She looks like Bub from Day of the Dead. I think it's pure desperation. I think she
that's the way
know where to turn. Her brother's lying on the couch, dying. Like, I need some help here. And Ragabi's a maniac, and she's coming at my brother with this magnetic wand, scrambling his brains.
Yeah, I that was my take on it too. Like, I thought it was crazy, like, because of their history. Like, she should definitely not trust the person that she met as Mrs. Selvig, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But who else can she call? Like, she's like really like needs someone who has some kind of idea about what this person just did. Cause she doesn't, Ragabi walked out, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't have Ragabi's number. She can't call her. She can't say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I was, you're kind of a dick. And I let that, I kind of responded to that in a way. So like, why don't we talk like adults? Like, that can't happen unless Ragabi just comes back. Right. And not calling after she comes up with the idea, not calling isn't going to like fix that. You know what I mean? It's sort of, so she's got to go down this list of like, who can I actually contact? You know what I mean? And the fact that she's not there anymore is almost enough that she can say, well, maybe, like, Harmony Cobel is a terrible person, but they fired her, so maybe she will help us to spite them or whatever, right?
And she can't really go to Lumen either.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's no one, there's nowhere or no one. And the other part of it is, and I think this is what she's alluding to at the end, is that her plan coming in there whenever she found out Mark was reintegrated was that they were going to, that she had the idea that the woman at the birthing center was an innie. So if they take him there, they might be able to talk to his innie, right? Like, that's her plan.
Good idea. Yeah.
Right. And so that's what she's calling her for, is to even just find out if that's possible. Right. So at the end, when she says, we want to try something different, she says, Mark's reintegrating. So we want to try something different. That's what she's talking about, right? Like she's saying, can you tell us about this birthing center? Can you take us there? Will this work? Ragabi said it wouldn't. It was two different things, but what else can they do? You know what I mean? And I think the other thing is that Mark woke up. We haven't seen, there's a thing at the, we saw the end of episode 7 when he wakes up, but we didn't see the conversation they had afterwards. Right.
Yeah.
So I think
we know he's talking because we heard him on the phone with Cobel.
Right. So I think that I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's the best way that they got this to come together that compared to some of the other things they did, but it doesn't bother me that much. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of that is to say, what's going to be the next step? I mean, are they going to go to do you think it's a possibility that is Mark fully reintegrated right now? Maybe that's the most important question.
It is, without a doubt, the most important question. And I have no idea, but I want to say no. The way that Ragabi was talking, it sounded like there was more to this process. She says, this is the only way, to make this work. And she's pointing to her magic wand.
Mm-hmm.
So process not over in my mind.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I think that there's still a little bit more, like flooding the chip might have moved things ahead, but I'm not expecting that he sat up on the couch, or I wasn't, you know what I mean? Like I could be open to it, but that wasn't the impression that I got, was that he just had all those shared memories that he was in whenever he was unconscious, and then he woke up, and then he just fully has his innie and outie memories perfectly aligned inside of his brain so that he can, just jump back and forth no problem. Like I don't think that's what's going on yet, right? I could be wrong, because that's flooding the chip is the very last thing that happened to him before he woke up there. So it's possible, but we're both kind of leaning to not fully ready to go yet. Need some fine tuning, right?
Yeah, and there's a good point in chat here from several people who say Devon's words were reintegrating, not reintegrated, and why would she want to try something else if he were fully integrated, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? If I'm trying to prove that that's what her next step is, and so if he is fully reintegrated, then that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I think that's what she was talking about. I think that's what they're trying to do. The Cold Harbor file is stuck at 96%. Do you think that Harmony Cobel would tell him, don't go into work, don't finish the file?
It's hard because I don't know what her actual goal is. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think by the end of the season, that file will be finished. Whether Harmony tells him not to go in or doesn't, I think that's the big thing, right? Like, what is Cold Harbor? It's been the thing all season. That's got to be an answered question by the end of this season, in my mind. And it's probably going to be something really dramatic where Mark finishes it and he then achieves full reintegration and realizes, oh shit, I shouldn't have finished that file because here's something horrible.
Okay, so this season 100% ends with a cliffhanger, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the season one ended, they did that so perfectly. Like, how do you not do that again? Like, you try to subvert expectations. Like, no, I think that you go, I think you realize like, hey, we know how to do this. You know what I mean? So let's do
Uh-huh.
that, right? Like maybe
Well, and
season
they
3
do the
you start
best
to switch
kind.
it up. Yeah. Maybe in season 3 you start to switch it up or something because you don't want every season to end, but you still got another one that you can pull, right? So that's
Oh, yeah.
my point. My thinking is that it 100% ends in another insane cliffhanger.
Yeah, I'm with you. But the way they do cliffhangers is they tell you what happened. They don't do this thing where like you stop midstream
Right
and you have no
before.
idea what happened.
Yeah. The
They tell you
action
what happened,
happens
and then you're like, oh my God, that's gonna
and then
affect everything. How are they gonna go
yeah.
on from here, right?
Mhm.
So we will know what happened. And I think that's the thing with Cold Harbor. We're gonna see what Cold Harbor is, and we're gonna be like, oh my God, that's way
What does
crazier
that
than I
mean?
thought.
Yeah.
How is this gonna affect everything else?
Yeah. Well, so I was going to say, so that's what you think it's going to be then, is it's going to
I think
be
so.
that. Okay.
I think there's gonna be maybe an attempt to get Gemma out, but it feels too early for that. It really does to me. The like as we get closer, when there were 4 episodes left, and I was like, okay, Mark knows that Gemma's down there. He's really motivated to get her out. Maybe in 4 episodes they can do that. With 2 episodes to go, and knowing that they have to hit a cliffhanger at the end, that's kind of
yeah,
not a lot of runway.
I still, I don't know if I'm with you on that. I'm still
Okay.
kind of like that. There's going to be a jailbreak situation. They're going to try.
Yeah.
You make a pretty good
Is
point.
that?
I mean, you make a pretty good case for it to be related to the file. Like you
But
definitely
Gemma's
got
been
the
an
wheels in
all-season
my head.
thing too.
What's that?
Gemma has also been an all-season thing as
Yeah.
well, right? So it could be either. Like, do you see a scenario where that's the cliffhanger? They attempt to break Gemma out, and then something is revealed that we didn't
Well,
expect.
I think that I think as far as what they set up with her turning back into Miss Casey when she goes up to the severance floor, and that
Yeah.
giving us the idea that if say Helly went down to the testing floor, that when she goes down there, she's going to wake up and be Helena, someone who is not an ally to our cause all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think that's popular now. That's something that came up like after the last episode. And I feel like that's pretty tasty. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what happens after that, but like at the same time with season 1, you know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt too. I was like, well, what the hell are they going to do now? How will Helly ever go back to work on the severed floor? Like, how can Mark, why would any of these people ever go back to the job? You know what I mean? And season 2 navigated that pretty well. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, I'm not saying that discredits it. I'm just saying it's kind of hard to see like how, because I mean, that would be the ultimate betrayal, right? Like, she would just be like they think they're going to get her out, and then she's like, nah, like, we need Gemma down here. Or she just like, wow, I didn't know we had her like a friggin' animal in a cage down here. Or there's a lot of different things that could come out from that situation, right? But like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, so many things changed after last season or last episode that it's really kind of, I'm still like, I'm in a different kind of holding pattern than I was at before, right? Because like, I was feeling pretty good about the idea that he wouldn't be able to be reunited with Gemma, you know, going into episode 7. Now, after that, it's like, well, shit, I really want them to be reunited now. And like, I don't want her to die whenever they cross. I don't want this to be like the Greek myth, you know what I mean? Like, I want it to be like, things to work out. And so, yeah, like, I don't know, it really did change up the landscape of like what's happening. And but I still kind of think that we have the map exists. They have a map to get to we know where it's at. They know where it's at. You know what I mean? Like, they know how to get to the testing floor. So they have to at least be on their way to the testing floor when the cliffhanger happens, if nothing else. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they could just say, oh, we're not going down there.
I think maybe there's a way to do both. Maybe
We'll see.
that's the surprise. They're going to do both with some
Well,
new function of the chip, maybe.
yeah, the reason why I asked about will she tell them to stop was for that exactly. And the only reason why I think that she might do that is because that kind of serves her interests too. If all bets are off once Cold Harbor's done, you know what I mean? Once they get to 100, then her leverage isn't shit after that anymore. Like that's possible, right? So like if she's trying to work her way back in or topple James or whatever, then you know what I mean? Like it might make sense for her to say, don't go into the office and fill, and even if she's not on their side, you know, like it's something that she could tell them to do that would also benefit her because it would buy her time as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, without knowing what they mean by Cold Harbor changing the world, you know, being the biggest development ever on the planet, it's hard to say, like, if she would want that to continue or if she wouldn't, right?
It's the cure for ether addiction, so they can really just give it to people all the time.
100 years too late on that, man. Like,
not in this timeline, not in this alternate reality. People are still huffing.
We need an oxy cure, oxy addiction cure. That's what we need.
Our timeline does, but
right.
Theirs is different.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. So the next episode is called The After Hours. You know, when I was making this, well, I saw it yesterday, I guess. The thumbnail for the next episode was Dylan, and I was like, damn, I really need some Dylan. You know what I mean? Like, Dylan hasn't played a part in any of these last two episodes. Like, it doesn't even really affect his existence or his story or anything else. In the summary for the next episode, the blurb, it says Dylan receives hard news.
Which Dylan?
Well, I'm guessing that it would be any, right? If it doesn't specify.
It could certainly be Audi if his wife is like cheating on him with himself, right?
Well, that could be. Yeah, that could be. Well, it says like it says Audi, Mark, and Devon team with an unexpected ally to enact a plan. So that's the first line. So Audi, Mark, it makes the distinction there. And then it says any heli investigates Mark's absence while Dylan receives hard news. So I was just kind of thinking that she didn't want to come see him again or something, right? Like, what could you do to any Dylan right now? No, his wife.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure where that's going for the rest of the season.
Well, because that was the way that they were keeping him. Like, the reason he hasn't gone back to get the map or done anything related to saving Miss Casey yet is because he doesn't want to lose his privileges of seeing his wife, right? So, like,
yeah.
When I was thinking of the scenario where they go into the basement and Helena wakes up, I'm thinking Mark's reintegrated, so it won't really affect him, or necessarily won't affect him in the same way. Dylan waking up would kind of fuck everything up, though, because Audi Dylan just being inside the Lumen building would be completely shocked and not have any investment either way to keep that a secret, right? So, like,
yeah, that's true.
I just assumed he wouldn't go. He wouldn't be there. But if if they make this thing about him having hard news, like, they have to do something with him, right? Like, he can't just sort of fade into the background for this the big finale either, right? So, but I guess the bottom line I'm saying here is I'm not really sure what's going on with him at the moment.
Yeah, how it's going to play into the larger story, I couldn't tell you.
The one thing that we talked about a little bit before too was, like, I'm really curious because we have to have a big Irving and Burt episode coming up too, right? There's no mention of them here.
It doesn't have to be a focused episode on them.
No, not like a departure, but like we have to get more about them before the end of the season too, and they're on the outside, so they're after you've had a couple of weeks to think about it. Where do you come down on what's going on with Burt?
I still think there's something fishy about Burt. I still think that discrepancy in the timeline is a tell. I don't think it's just John Noble not remembering how long he's been with Lumen.
Yeah, it's been a while. I guess when I think about that scene, the things that I know that I feel like I know are true are that John Noble does believe that he's going to go to heaven. Like, I believe that the Christianity stuff coming from him is real.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I do too.
And that he wants that they wanted to do the severance process because that might get part of Burt into heaven as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think Burt is lying about how long he worked for Severance, right? So when he says he's a scoundrel, I think that could be directly related to him working, whether it's on the testing floor or if it's on like something that predates Severance that is pretty bad that they did. Like the testing floor would be 100%, but I'm not exactly sure how we're supposed to feel about Gemma as far as like how many people had been there before her after episode 7, you know? Like, yeah. I kind of thought before we had episode 7, I kind of thought the testing floor would be multiple different people down there and something that had been going on for a while. When you see it, it feels pretty tailored towards her and her being the only subject and perhaps the only one that they've ever had for whatever they're doing right now.
Yeah.
So that changed up a little bit, but I feel like that whole part of it could be true. You know what I mean? Like that he really was severed. Burt actually worked at, because I feel like the evidence for him being a severed employee is there, you know, through Felicia and other stuff. And the only reason I can think that someone who was involved in creating the process might do that is if they were really in love with their husband and they did want to do that for them, for their spiritual beliefs. So, you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like that's still possible. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
And it also gives Audi Burt like license to do whatever scoundrel shit he wants to do.
Right.
And
That's
still,
what I was thinking, amazing.
Still have a spiritual out at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Which is what really makes this, you know, interesting for what's going to happen next. I also believe that Irving knows a lot more of that going into that dinner than he actually lets on too.
Oh, you know think what I mean?
So? I think he's been investigating Lumen for a long time, and he had Burt's name on the list and everything else. Like, we know Zinni was in love with Burt, but what does his Audi care about Burt otherwise? You know what I mean? Like, why was that one of the people that he was watching so closely? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of room for some interesting stuff to happen there between those two.
Yeah, there's really a picture coming together of the last 2 episodes for this season that are just crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like just nonstop with all the things we care about right now. Like we've got those backstory episodes out of the way. We got the testing floor fully locked in. Now let's just go crazy with this plot and current timeline. And then I'm super excited.
That's how the first season played out too. You know what I mean? Like that's exactly the thing. Like, I think most people didn't watch it week to week. I think a lot of people binged it after the fact that they heard about it. So they probably didn't have the same experience, but it was pretty slow developing until you got to those last couple episodes. And then it was just like, holy hell.
Yeah.
Like I enjoyed it the whole way, but I know that, and a lot of people did, you know what I mean? Like there were people who were watching and were enthusiastic about it, but it did definitely change. It went from being like, this is a cool show and like the response to it to like, this is one of the best shows. This is one of the best things that happened in a long time kind of thing. Like that didn't really come together until after the last 2 episodes. Let's see what we got here. Ed Scishands, thank you for the 5. At the end of the Twilight Zone episode, The After Hours, Rod Serling mentions Casey at the bat. We talked about this the last time you were on here, right? Or not the last time, but the time before that, when Quinn was here, we talked about this Twilight Zone episode.
Is that the one? Okay. I know we talked about Twilight Zone, but I couldn't remember which one.
Yeah, the After Hours. That's where the name of this episode comes from. At the time, you said you hadn't watched it. Have you watched it since then, by any chance?
No.
Casey at the Bat. That's throwing me a little bit.
It's like Rookie of the Year, right?
Casey the Bat is
it's an old poem. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like about the Babe Ruth character who strikes out, right? At the end.
I think so. God, it's been decades since I've thought about Casey at the Bat.
Yeah, it's thrown me for a little bit of a loop here. I think Ed Scishands, if you elaborate, that would be in the comments now. That would be great. Because I'm trying to figure out what the connection he's trying to make there is.
Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting episode of Twilight Zone. It's about identity, right? It's like basically, I guess if you don't want spoilers, don't watch this next part here, but it's an old episode of TV that's been out for a long time. But the basic premise is that you see this woman, she goes to the department store. It's all kind of really confusing. And she realizes that she was a mannequin, like that she's actually an in-store mannequin, that once a month or once a year, they all get to leave for like a period of time. And so she leaves, and then on her time away, she forgets who she is. You know what I mean? Like she starts to believe that she's a real person when she's not. It's about a baseball player named Casey.
Like the Twilight Zone episode after?
Oh, it's the one after it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not the one. So yeah, I don't know. I lost the thread on that one. What the question was. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I'm not sure if it actually means anything, but interesting, obviously, because of the name Casey, of course, or it could be just an Easter egg that they did and why they named her Miss Casey. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about the connection to the character named Miss Casey. I was thinking about what that story was about, like, because it was the name was familiar, but I couldn't remember the moral of the tune or whatever. Yeah, that is an interesting connection, Miss Casey. And I was just, when you said that, I was just thinking about friggin' milkshake turning her around on the floor up there.
Mm-hmm. I guess we understand something we didn't talk about with that. I guess we now understand the wintertide comment from Milkshake to Casey.
Yeah, she's you're talking about Miss Wong, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it was she's on the same path that Harmony was on.
Yeah. Just not at an ether factory.
And I guess, that sets it up for season 3 for us to find out the Milchek origin story, obviously.
Right.
Do you think that we're going to see Miss Wong stick around, or do you think she's a one-season character?
I think until we get a little more resolution on the Milchek stuff, she might stick around. They seem to have set her up as an antagonist to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. They have to do so much in these last 2 episodes. I can't see them getting to all of that. So maybe they leave that for next season and she sticks around.
If push comes to shove and their little escape comes to light, does Milchek, do you see any way that Milchek could turn and be an ally to the Innies?
Yeah, yeah. So the one crack that we saw in Milkshake this season is around the paintings, the paintings of a
That's
black
something that
Kier.
does have to kind of be, there has to be another step in that direction somewhere,
I
huh?
think so. Yeah. So I could see it. There is a path there, but again, I think it's a little too early to push him over the edge. I think it's a season 3 thing.
I think it's going to come down to a decision for him to either choose his, because he's always been presented as a company man, you know what I mean? And now this season has made me think that I was never really sure about his devotion to Kier, but this is making it sound like he's on the same track as Swong and Cobel. So he is at least into it, if not having the same zealotry about it as the other people. So I feel like his decision is going to come down to, like, will he choose that, or will he choose these human beings that are being treated like shit? You know what I mean? And it could really go either way, the way the character's set up, right? Like, it'll be devastating if he would be like the way he turned her around, both different times in the last 2 chances that he had to even just treat her like a human being instead of like a piece of equipment to put in the closet or whatever. But like, yeah, like it would be, it would be like, you could understand it going either way, and it would have the same, it would have a good impact to the story either way. I think, like, I don't feel like I like the character because he's fun to watch and he's entertaining. I don't know if I care, like, I don't need him to do like the moral, or I don't need him to turn into a hero necessarily. You know what I mean? Like it would be enjoyable if he did, but
I think so. And every time they show me a little bit of humanity in him, I want more of it, I guess. That starts to make him feel like somebody I could root for.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's already on the outside there. You know what I mean? Like he already feels like he's separate, and the isolation kind of sucks. But then at the same time, he just does terrible things as a part of his job. Like, he does his job, you know what I mean? Which is to do terrible things all the time. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, none of that's really making him sympathetic to me. Ed Scishands again says, speaking of the Twilight Zone, do you think there's any reality that all of this is taking place in a child's dollhouse or snow globe? I hope that's a joke.
I mean, they put LOL after it, so probably. God, that's the worst version of this show, right?
Yeah, that's the worst version of any show. You know what I mean? Like,
fair. Yep.
Don't make me care about shit and then tell me it wasn't real.
People liked it, but then that's it. They did it once because it was
novel.
You
you can do it once. That's true.
Right. And it's been done, so no more of that.
Yeah, like that's like my sort of rule of thumb. Like, I really hate the fake death thing. Like, if you're gonna do it, like if you resolve it within the same hour before like, if there's no break into the next time, I can live with that. I understand it is completely dramatic, you know what I mean? Like, it's a way to get everyone excited and then turn that around, and then you get another feeling when you find out that, oh, I was wrong, But if you even wait until the next week to reveal it, like, I'm already like, you're at arm's length now. Like, I don't know if I can trust you anymore, and I don't know if 100%. I want to watch your show. You know what I mean?
Totally agree. Yeah.
Like, because that's why I watch TV, is because I want to feel stuff. You know what I mean? Like, the story, I want to get wrapped up in this story where we get to spend a lot of time with characters.
It breaks the illusion.
And
that is what it is. It shows me that you are actively trying to manipulate me. And I know that's what all of television is. I know that's what all of storytelling is, but I don't want to know that in the moment. I want to feel like you're just telling me a compelling story, as opposed to you're trying to get me to feel an exact way with this.
Yeah, I want to feel like I'm experiencing the story with you, instead of like you're doing something to me.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, so I want to get lost in it. I'm you know, like people complain about things and I totally get it. But like part of like my enjoyment of television is like, I want to be entertained by it. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, it's, you know, it's like, oh, I can't help it. It's just so good. Like, you know what I mean? It just sucks me in every time, you know, like that can be true to a certain extent, but like I'm susceptible to the things that a good television show does. You know what I mean? I actively seek it out. You know what I mean? Like I like to watch TV. I like, you know, like, I guess for a long time when I was growing up, I was like, had a love-hate relationship with TV, with this, like, I kind of hate that I like this so much, but
okay.
As I've grown older, you know what I mean? Like I think it's I like it as a medium, you know what I mean? Like I like the things that it can do. And then when people understand how it works and then like use that to the best, get the most out of it, you know what I mean? Like that's where I really enjoy it. So when you start trying to like shock me and fool me and doing things like that, like it just seems unnecessary, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's why I love this show. It never feels like it's trying to fool you. It just doesn't have, you just don't have enough information yet in like all cases.
That kind of, when you say that, it kind of reminds me of a lot of the theory crafting that's going on right now. Like there was a few since the last episode where I started out and I'm like, oh yeah, this tracks perfectly with episode 7 and all the revelations. It's really, really well reasoned and they're really paying attention to the details that were presented there. And then it goes into like the area where we don't know. And then I'm just like, no, I can't get on board with that at all. You know what I mean? Like it just they lose me every time.
Yeah, that's why the cloning thing was never like, I was never super keen on that. A lot of people had theories about that stuff, and I'm like, okay, but there's nothing here that tells us that. Nothing. You're kind of just making things up.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like after the last episode, did you get any new theories about what's going, like, did it change your idea about what was going on with Cold Harbor, or are you still just like, I don't know what Cold Harbor is?
Yeah, I don't think we really got any more information on any of that stuff, like the grand overall theories.
Like we definitely got the idea that what the refining is about setting those rooms up rather than what happens in the room.
Episode. Yeah, totally.
But like that doesn't really change much because we don't, you know what I'm saying? Like
we still don't know what is in
it. Feels like a huge reveal, which it is in a way, but it doesn't really, it's not the kind of reveal that like is the missing piece where you can finally put it all together because you have that. It's the next step. It's almost like it's the beginning of the introduction. It's the same with like the control room. Like knowing those guys exist doesn't really change much because we don't exactly know what they do. It's super cool. It seems like really huge, but like it doesn't, seeing that they exist doesn't like, oh, that's the piece that was missing. Now I understand everything they're trying to do. You know?
Yeah. It's early pieces in the puzzle that don't show us even, really what the picture could be.
Michael Sanger again says, do you also get the feeling that Dan Erickson already knows how the show ends? Like Sam Esmail, not like JJ.
I hope
he has said that. He's said it that they, in interviews. I would just push back a little bit to this sentiment, not what Michael's saying directly, because I do think that Mr. Robot ended, pretty good in the sense that it had an idea to it. You know what I mean? But just in general, like when I see people throw the idea around a lot that they're just making it up as they go along, like kind of whenever they want to criticize things for being like too like lost or whatever. And I mean, literally that's what people do. You know what I mean? Like everybody makes everything up as they go along. Like that's how the creative process works. You know what I mean? So like, I don't think that there's and I don't think you can understand how everything is going to play out in advance and that's going to somehow make it better. You know what I mean? I think knowing where you're going is certainly good, you know, like which is what I think Mike Old Sanger is saying here is that I think the problem is that if you just sort of get caught up in the idea of like, wow, people really like to be surprised, so we have to just keep one-upping the surprise every time, you know, like we need to really pull some shit out of our ass that will really shock them like it did the first time, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I think like, I mean, just as someone who had you know, who did creative stuff, you know, like you start with an idea and then it seems to work best for me. Like if you're willing to let that idea change as it makes sense, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I guess like, you know, people who have talked about that a lot, I guess would be like Vince Gilligan about, you know, Breaking Bad, you know what I mean? Just sort of like they have a general idea where it's going, but they don't know how they're going to get there. And they like to put themselves in that story. It's a little bit easier because there's not all this mystery that they have to solve, you know, like it's the genre of this does make this different. So I guess I should just say that out front, you know, like they do have a responsibility kind of to answer some of the questions that they are making us think about. But as far as like creatively, like, you know, you want them to make something that that makes sense as far as how it develops, you know, like how the characters, because like, you know, they in their mind, they have what these characters are, but then they bring actors in who read the lines, and then, you know, we see them and we respond to them. So like, I feel like you want that to all be as flexible as it can be.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think it's a reasonable fear. We've seen shows do it poorly enough, and you obviously we're talking about Lost. I think Lost is an example of a show that was trying something new that hadn't really been done before and didn't get it exactly right, but made a reasonable effort at it. And you have stuff like Westworld that just went way too far with this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And
did you watch?
And so
can I just? I don't know if I know this already, or you said this already, but did you watch Lost live?
Yeah, I was watching. That was kind of like the first big TV show that I really got into, and was listening to podcasts like Jay and Jack on it, and then the Dharmalars.
So that was really like really inspirational for you, and
totally, yeah. A lot of the format that we still have to this day came from like Jay and Jack's podcast and the way they were doing things, because I thought it was great. But like, I understand why people are worried about this. I do. But I also look at all of the patterns of this show and I say, they're not like those other shows that kind of mess this up. They are not trying to ever trick us. They're just trying to push down like a path with not enough context for us to quite grasp what's happening. But it's clear that they know, like, if you ask me, do they know what's in Cold Harbor? I'm saying, yeah, of course they do. And they probably knew before they started writing episode 1 of season 2 what Cold Harbor is. So I think the show is different, and I think the show is smarter about it than some other shows out there, and I think it can be done well, and I have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to pull this off.
Yeah, and like I guess that was, you know, the point that I was just wanting to say there was that this idea that having everything figured out in advance is not I don't think it's the solution to the problem. Like you'll see so many people fire off in the comments in a Reddit post or something like that. You know what I mean? There's so many moving parts. That's what makes it exciting and dynamic, but it can also be very disappointing. You know what I mean? And so you're right on that level for sure. We've been burnt with this kind of show that gets us hyper fixated on the details way more than we've been satisfied. So,
yeah, Mr. Robot is an example, I think, of how it was done really well, with the exception of maybe, is it season 2 or season 3? It's the one where he goes to prison. Season 2 is the one
that most people, that most people would criticize.
Yeah, that was. That was not a good move, but the rest of it I really loved, and they kept a mystery going 90% of that show. So,
you know, when you bring that up, it's funny because I was watching Mr. Robot. I covered it, but I don't think I started covering it Maybe I did cover it in season 2, but that's like when it was like one of the first things I ever did. So I won't even stand by any of.
I gotta go back and watch your season 2 Mr. Robot videos.
Either way, like I was a he's not in jail truther though.
Okay, nice.
So I got completely eviscerated whenever that reveal happened. Like all my thinking about that season was incorrect. So that's just the thing that happened. That's one of the I got a lesson out of that though. You know, you can't just decide that you don't like the way that something might, because as it played out, I didn't think it when it actually played out, like I thought they did a pretty good job with it. You know what I mean? I just was of the idea that, like what we were kind of talking earlier, like, I don't want you to trick me like that. You know, like you're not telling me that he's anywhere. You're telling me that he's just hanging out in this coffee shop talking to Leon or whatever. Like,
yeah, it's like never.
If he's really in jail, then that's how are you going to explain that? And they did, and it was okay. But that was the part that turned me off to this theory when it was a theory, was that would be completely, that would be as a trick, it'd be used for the tricking value rather than like just great storytelling or whatever.
Yeah, a single twist is just almost never worth it to fool your audience for that long. They're just going to feel betrayed.
And that's another thing about, I don't want to talk about Mr. Robot anymore, but just the one thing since it came up was that that was what was refreshing about that show to me is that Sam Esmail would take a lot of chances like that. Like he, especially towards the later seasons, like he had all those episodes that would be like, well, they're not going to have any dialogue in this episode. They're not going to do this in this episode. You know what I mean? Like it's a oneer, or it's, you can think the whole episode's a oneer.
Whole episode based on a Camus book. It's like, what?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he had all these ideas and he actually made them happen. I would say that it's a little hit or miss, but not too many people do that, you know what I mean? Because they're so worried about the ones that don't work that they'll just like say, no, we better not, we better play it safe or whatever. I would rather season 2 suck. If that was what, I didn't come away with that feeling, but a lot of people say that it's the weakest of them. I'd rather them take that chance, and as long as they learn from it or whatever, you know what I mean? And like, I don't know. I feel like it's better that people take chances than not take them at all. I feel like it makes the whole thing better in the long run.
I think it adds a lot of texture to the show, like it's doing here, in Severance. I've really enjoyed these departure episodes. I think if you stick us down in the severed floor for 2 full seasons and we can't really get outside of that, it's going to start to feel like claustrophobic, like the show's too small. It's got that's a thing.
That's a thing that I've seen people say, and I know from covering other shows that is going to be an issue. Like, does it feel like we're on the end of having a show that takes place in MDR department? Like, do you ever see them really going back to where we're clocking in and sitting around that cubicle?
Probably not.
Like, no. It can't.
Maybe a couple more times, but not for real. Not like they're there to do work. No.
So, right. So that's what I would say for sure. Like, I feel like that is done. Unless there's like some kind of crazy reset, and I don't really like any of the options as far as that goes. You know what I mean? Like because the Audis are too involved at this point, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So, and just for other reasons, I don't like it, but it's not worth it to even go down. Like, basically, that part of this show is done. So every time that happens, there's always a contingency of people that say Westworld was better. It should have never left the park. The Bear was better when it was just about crazy chaos in the back of the thing. It should have never moved on to the next phase. What do you think? I mean,
well, I'll say I think the best episode of The Bear is season 2's Fishes. So that doesn't take place inside the kitchen at all. I mean, someone else's kitchen. Yeah.
I like Fishes. I wouldn't say it's my favorite. The Richie one's my favorite.
Oh yeah, where he goes and learns how to be a human being.
The fishes was like, it affected me more. You know what I mean? The first time I saw it. And and there's a lot of good stuff there, but it's just so uncomfortable, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And relatable. Like, I think everybody has those. There's things in that everyone has from their families that they can relate to. Hopefully not all of it, like, because Carmy's got like some shit there, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm sure there's lots of people who can, which sorry, you know, like I feel for you, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, I think that I don't know, like that I don't know why I can't think of what the one that Richie's is, or what the hell is that? What's the name of the other one? Fishes and
I can't remember. Which
he
Richie
does
one?
Forks. He does
the
Forks.
one where he goes to the restaurant and orders
when he goes to work
pizza
at
for
Terry's,
the couple.
Terry's place.
Okay, yeah. I don't know the name of that episode.
It might be Forks.
Anyway,
but yeah, the way that one is like the kind of episode where I was just like embarrassed for myself that I liked it so much. You know what I mean? Because it's like
the Richie one.
Yeah, because it's just like it's just like really earnest. You know what I mean? So it feels like kind of uncomfortable. That it's just like, that's just cool. Like when he's going down the road listening to Taylor Swift and like rocking out and shit like that. It's just like, whoa, why is this so enjoyable? Michael Sanger has another one here. I can see a flashback episode with young Kier selling ether as a flim flam artist. Well, we were talking about that earlier. That could be a thing. Do you think we'll ever get? You ever think we'll go get the true story of Kier? How would that serve the current story?
I mean, it would have to coincide somehow.
Because it would almost be historical.
Goals.
Yeah.
Well, to tell us what the goals of Kier really are, right? Like.
Yeah, but like if you're thinking about zealots, you would never really be able to, they wouldn't, unless you could provide evidence. Like, us knowing it through a flashback or whatever wouldn't convince anybody who was actually full on indoctrinated, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm all
but
for
it would give us insight into what they really want,
trying to do. Yeah, yeah.
I would like to see that. That'd be cool.
I would definitely like to see that. You know what I mean? But like, I was just trying to figure out a reason why they would actually get there. Luna Cascade, audiences have become so sophisticated that writers have had to step up their game. Audiences now demand originality. I think that's true to a certain extent, but I feel like the same stories still work on us the best, and we've been hearing literally the same ones our entire lives, just with different characters and slight alterations. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
I do believe that I do think they have to step up their game in a way that, because like just in our lifetime we've seen a huge difference in the way that people engage with stuff. You were there on the ground with Lost. Like, that's pretty much where it started happening, right?
Yeah, we owe a lot of the modern era of TV to Lost, and it's kind of pioneering of a format.
Just the way that people engage too, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally. Listening to podcasts about television shows was not a thing.
That was not a thing
before that show. Yeah.
You would be like, why? If someone told you could do that, you'd be like, why? You know,
I watched the show. I
watched it here. Like, even watching it again would just sort of be like, why? You know, I mean, it was like a once a week thing. You tuned in. If you missed one every once in a while, they were set up in a way that you could still kind of figure out what was going on. You know what I mean? And really, before, you know, just a little bit before that, there was hardly that much serialized stuff in the first place.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For sure. You'd have like a bunch of whatever monster of the week. We were talking about this in reference to X-Files. Like, X-Files is an example of this that's done in like much smaller bites, right? Like, you'd have, out of 26 episodes a season, you'd have 23 that were nothing to do with the overall story, and then you'd have the smoking man come in for 4 minutes and have a conversation with Skinner or something, and that would be your connection to next season where they're going to do another 2 minutes. But Lost was all that. Lost just took that element and just completely ran with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was X-Files is a really interesting TV show, like how it was just sort of straddled those two time periods. Like
totally
that it had an overall like overarching story, like was pretty rare in the first place. And it was an ambitious one, you know what I mean? Like it did make you feel like they were going to eventually give you some answers on that.
And then they let the show run for like 11 seasons and everybody got bored.
Yeah.
Dumb.
Yeah, it's funny too because like with that, like syndication was so important. Like that was just such a better deal for them, was just to have lots of episodes that they could make they made their real money on selling it into syndication, not like the ads that played during the live episodes. So like they didn't have a financial imperative to like tell a story that was like really
tight.
Yeah, and concise, and then just got to an ending and just fucking stuck the landing. Like none of that stuff really mattered. They needed a bunch of episodes that they needed a bunch of episodes they could just keep recycling, that people could be like, if I saw that, I would watch that again.
Yep.
You know. All right. Well, I feel like now that we've talked about all different shows, we're probably getting to the end of our time together. Let's see, Ether Blue Velvet. I don't know what that's about, but I like the composition of those three words together. Just scanning the comments for a second. You want to do your plugs, Jim, while I do that?
Oh yeah. If people didn't hear me do it at the beginning, I have a podcast covering Severance with my co-host Aaron, who you might have seen on this show as well. It's called Waffle Potty. Head over to, I don't know, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys get podcasts. Check that out. We're also covering Yellow Jackets right now. We run the Bureau of Citizen Detectives. That's the name of the podcast. And we're going to be covering a lot of stuff. We cover all sorts of TV. Andor is a big one coming up. We're actually starting our rewatch of season 1 of Andor, and we're going to be doing that over on... I imagine we're going to release that on Tribe of Two. I haven't actually discussed it with Aaron, but Tribe of Two is our Star Wars kind of catch-all podcast. And then Last of Us, which were the...
Disney, they don't give screeners to anybody for anything, huh?
I've never gotten any screeners from them. I'm sure they give them out to the big reviewers. Like if you work at, for some reason,
well, I know that they
magazines.
I know that them owning all these other places now makes it harder to get them. Like I know that I was having a hell of a time getting them for Shogun, because FX was like, well, we're owned by Disney now and can't just do that anymore.
That's a bummer. But yeah, we're going to be covering all that stuff too when it comes out. So check us out, baldmove.com.
Yeah, I've been a listener for a long time, and I fully vouch for the Bald Move podcasting.
Appreciate it.
Experience. Let's see. I don't really see anything else that I need to. I did mention earlier, but I'll mention it again. Next week, Popcorn for Dinner will be here again, along with Aaron. And then in the finale, it will at least be the three of us, Bald Move, both guys here and me. And then maybe we'll get one other, guest if we can. I'm feeling good about it. This is the second season. I know it was had pretty good reviews whenever people were seeing it in advance, and I don't always trust that, but this, it was a hard job. That's what I thought about episode 8 too. It had a hard job, right? Like it had to follow one of the best in the thing, best episodes, and also not really involve the rest of the cast in a way that's also, it's tough for people when they're really I think it did navigate that pretty well, and we're set up for like a really good ending. So like unless they would completely drop the ball, which I don't think is really something that I would expect in one finale. Like I think that you can probably say that this is, it lived up to the hype, and it did everything you want to see a show do in the second season. It's that's like the original concept is always, it's always right there. And it's usually the thing that's the most developed in the creator's mind. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah,
a lot of shows improve in the second season if they're kind of shaky in the first, but like when they're super good in the first, like this was, then that's where you worry, like maybe that was a one time thing. And I feel like at this point we can say, no, this is just a good show. We enjoy it. It's going to be, we're in for like a nice ending coming up in the next couple of weeks.
I hope so. And I think so.
All right. So thanks for coming, Jim. Thanks for everyone who participated, everyone with the super chats. Definitely appreciate that. And just kept the conversation going there. There's a lot of interesting stuff that think about. I might try to do an extra, like we now that we don't get the screeners until Monday, I might try to do an extra thing this week. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll definitely be back next week, like I said. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.